Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630.
WMAL.
It is 7:37, and at 1:51 and 4 seconds yesterday, we all had one great common experience. That was an earthquake, 5.8 magnitude quake down in Mineral, Virginia, that shook everything from South Carolina all the way to the Canadian border. And it was quite a rocking ride. And when something only happens of that magnitude every 114 years, we ought to talk to a seismologist or a geophysicist and try to understand exactly what we experienced. And we just actually happen to have one on the phone now.
Look at that.
How about that? It's like we planned it that way. Mitch Withers is on. He's the Seismic Network Director for the Center for Earthquake Research and Information. Where is that located, Mitch?
We're in Memphis.
Memphis, Tennessee. Well, if you're a guy who's a geophysicist or you study seismology, you know, yesterday was the day we go, cool, earthquake. What do we know about this earthquake, and what is different about this earthquake than perhaps other earthquakes that we often hear about?
Well, the big difference between this one and other earthquakes is, I have to get a little scientific. The theory we use to explain earthquakes is called plate tectonics.
Right.
And that says that the Earth's surface is composed of a bunch of different rigid plates that are all moving around, and at their edges, where they grind past each other, earthquakes occur. One of the more famous edges is the San Andreas Fault out in California.
Right.
And Virginia actually is right in the middle of one of these rigid plates, the North American plate. And so according to plate tectonics, you don't get earthquakes in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what makes it different is it happens, this earthquake yesterday occurred in a place where the theory doesn't explain it. So obviously we need to make some improvements to the theory. And this earthquake actually is a good example of a learning experience for us where we can hopefully make a little bit of progress on refining the theory to help explain why earthquakes like this occur.
If it wasn't two plates rubbing together, then what do you think causes something like? What's the theory?
Well, geology has a very long history, of course, and it wasn't, Virginia wasn't always in the middle of a rigid plate. The plates form and break apart, and new plates form over millions of years, hundreds of millions of years, all the time. And so Virginia was, at one time, at the edge of a plate. And so there are ancient faults everywhere in the eastern U.S. And so where when we do get earthquakes, we get earthquakes along these ancient faults. And so there is a lot of stress in the interior of the plates, and that does cause these ancient faults to rupture now and then. And when and where is a bit of a crapshoot for us, and so we need to learn more to help explain why and where these earthquakes happen on these ancient faults.
Is it likely that such activity on these ancient faults is going to continue to be rare, or might it be more often in the future? Do we know?
I think it's likely to continue to be rare. Fortunately for us, geology works at a very slow pace in human lifetime.
Good thing.
So I think that we shouldn't expect any behavior any differently in the next 10 years than what we've seen in the past 100, or even 1,000 years.
But we've had earthquakes before that have occurred in the middle of a plate, like what happened yesterday in Mineral, Virginia, right?
That's right. There was one in Southwest Virginia in 1897 in Giles County. There were the Great New Madrid earthquakes here in the Mississippi Valley. And notice I said Mississippi with fewer syllables than most people. Back in 1811 and 1812, some of the largest earthquakes in U.S. history. And there was a magnitude 5.2 on the Indiana-Illinois border back in 2008. So we get magnitude 5 earthquakes in the central of the plate fairly regularly, and they happen all over the place.
Do we know how deep this one was in the earth? Because always reported, remember in Japan when that earthquake happened, if it's a shallow quake, it tends to do more damage. How deep was this one? Do we know?
The best data we have right now says it was at about 6 kilometers, so that's probably, about 4 miles.
4.7, I read.
And is there any truth to the idea we were talking about? We were compensating for our East Coast wimpyism earlier and saying, hey, we can feel it more than the West Coast because of our bedrock or something. You know, but I don't know if we're making that up or not. Is there a difference in the way different magnitudes feel in different places?
If you're right on top of the earthquake, no. If you're 90 miles away in Washington, D.C., yes, it makes a big difference.
Huh.
Because the rocks are so old. We're in the middle of the plate, and so the rocks are old, and they're much more competent in the eastern U.S. And in the western U.S., they're all broken up and relatively new rocks.
Aha, yes.
So it's like the difference between ringing a solid bell in the east and ringing a fractured one or a broken bell in the west.
So it's not
rings much. It'll travel much farther, much stronger.
There's a report out on Twitter. You know, we all sort of are now relying on Twitter to get a lot of our information in situations like this. There was one Twitter tweet that was getting a lot of attention. It said a guy in New York City looks at his BlackBerry or his phone, and he got a tweet that said D.C. had just had an earthquake, and he said, and it was about 10 seconds later we felt it in New York. Is that right?
Is that possible?
Is that possible?
Yes,
how long does it take for it to go there?
Earthquakes travel. The earthquake waves travel at about 6 kilometers per second. So yeah, it's going to take a few tens of seconds to get from Central Virginia to New York, and tweets move at the speed of the internet.
That's pretty interesting.
Light, yeah.
So the internet and the Twitter is faster than a seismic wave from an earthquake. How amazing is that?
It's actually one of the technologies we're trying to take advantage of. There's a demonstration project in Southern California where we're trying, and this is already done in Japan, where we're trying to take advantage of the speed of the internet and radio waves, where if we can send that information about the earthquake to cities, large cities nearby, we can actually perhaps get a few seconds or tens of seconds of warning before the strong shaking arrives at major cities.
I don't know if this is outside your science realm or not, but I'll ask you anyway. There are reports that there were animals at the zoo that were, making alarm sounds or, giving an indication that something may be up. We heard the same thing about the tsunami in Thailand several years ago. How do animals, or do you believe that animals know that something is coming before the rest of us actually feel the earthquake?
Well, there's a lot about nature that science doesn't know and can't explain. And we get reports about just like that after every major earthquake. But I'll also ask the question, how many times have those animals actually made similar noises
right.
when there was no earthquake?
Right.
So we might just also be focusing on observing what we want to observe rather than and ignore all the times that it happened and nothing else happened. So making the association.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Mitch.
Yeah,
Sure.
good stuff. Thank